Welcome back to another episode of Local Search Tuesdays. This week's video is another longer one because I'm sharing my entire presentation from another recent conference. I know. This is 4 weeks in a row of longer episodes. But now that a few conferences are starting to be in person again, I'm excited to share new presentations with you. A few weeks ago, I spoke at the Digital Summit Conference in Philadelphia, and while I was really just there to get a cheesesteak, I did present a half-hour session on local SEO that was a huge hit at the conference. So without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome to Ricky Bobby's Guide to Showing Up in Local Searches. I'm Greg, but you already know that because you're watching this on my Tuesday video. And you've probably heard me tell the story before, but I do speak at a lot of conferences all over the world. And sometimes you see some not great presenters. And those not great presenters have white backgrounds and black Arial font and tons of bullet points. And all they do is read their bullet points. So because of that, I firmly believe that bullet points kill kittens. And today's presentation, as always, will be completely pet safe. And today's theme is comedy movies. So we have 113 references to comedy movies, with at least one movie for every year in the last 50 years. And this time we've got 36 movies alone just from 1985, because that was the golden year of American film comedy. And for those of you that haven't seen everything that's mentioned, there is attribution on the side. So you'll learn some great stuff about SEO and have a kick-ass list of movies to watch later. So let's kick this off. Why the long face? Are you spending too much time looking up at competitors that rank higher in local searches? It's really frustrating, isn't it? I know a lot of times you might feel like you're clueless about how SEO works, but today I'm going to help. But I don't want you to think that I've got a huge head with its own gravity system. I do have a lot of tips, but I've been around the block a few times and I know some awesome stuff, and I'm here today to share it with you. And unlike some other speakers you may have seen in the past, I'm not going to talk out of my ass. I'm going to give you awesome tips you can use today. But keep in mind, you can't just pick one or two, because there's no miracle pill when it comes to SEO. You have to put in the time and you have to put in the effort. But if you do put in the time and the effort, you'll make your sites as visible and as awesome as the Flying Elvises. And just like a fat guy in a little coat, I'm going to squeeze in a ton of stuff to talk to you about today to help you have a better understanding about local SEO and how it works. Now, there have been a lot of sessions at conferences lately about content and content strategy, but your content doesn't really matter if it's not going to show up in searches. Nobody's going to see it. And we have to understand that in today's post-COVID landscape, every sale starts with a search on Google first. So if you're not showing up in those local searches, you're going to lose to your competitors who do show up in searches. If you've got a brick and mortar storefront where you do face-to-face business with customers, or if you do face-to-face business with customers at their location, like a plumber or an electrician, then you need local SEO. And it's important to understand that if that applies to you, you need to realize that there are multiple algorithms at play in Google, and the local algorithm is different from the traditional regular SEO that you typically talk about, because it's different algorithm with different signals. And most businesses that need local SEO have no idea what it is or that they even need it. And if you're not sure, also think about the fact that most people are searching on smartphones. And when you do a search on a smartphone, your results are automatically going to be localized to the area that you're in when you do the search. If you need help understanding how local works, I like to use pizza delivery as an example. And as always, I've got links to other videos I've done in the past throughout presentations. So you can always go to these URLs and check out other videos if you'd like more information. But with pizza delivery, think of it that you're sitting in your office and you type only 2 words into Google: pizza delivery. You get a list of all the pizza spots right by your office. But then if you went home and tried the same search at home with the same 2 words, you get totally different results. Now, most people obviously aren't going to do the same search in 2 places and really consider those results. But if you think about it, you type the exact same search phrase in and got totally different results. And that's because Google understands you need a pizza delivered from nearby, and it's going to show you local results to the location that you're in when you do the search. Now, that explains how it works. Simple math explains why you need it. And definitely watch this video. It goes into a lot more detail, but In most cases, for any type of business we're talking about, there's usually 15 to 20 businesses that are trying to show up on page one in a local area at a minimum. And on page one, once you take out all of the aggregate sites, you're looking at maybe 7 or 8 spots that those businesses could show up in. If there's 20 fighting for those 8 spots, that's 12 people that are going to be all the way back on page 2. And really, that's 2 of those will be back on page 3 because page 2 only has 10 spots. So 2 of the 20 will never get seen because they're on page 3. But most of you are probably in markets that are a little bit more crowded or more dense with competitors. In some cases, there's up to a couple of hundred competitors fighting for page 1, and that's why you've got to do SEO. And it's important to understand where the algorithm is going to display these localized results. The key differentiator, the thing that really lets you know, hey, this is the local algorithm, is when you do a search and you see the map pack with the map and the 3 results underneath. But then you can also click view all. And when you do that, it takes you to what we call the local finder page, which goes beyond just the top 3. And it looks pretty similar, but users could also go directly to Google Maps and do a search in Google Maps. And also local results are displayed there. And then below that map pack, you also have regular organic results, except they're not regular organic results. They're localized organic results. And like I mentioned earlier, local is more complicated because that algorithm includes additional signals. It's also more complicated because the things that you would do for one type of business aren't necessarily the things that would work for another type of business. And even more difficult because the things that would work in one city don't necessarily work in another. What you would need to do in a crowded metro like Dallas or Chicago or LA is totally different than what you would do for a similar business in the middle of Wyoming where there's not much competition. And then to make things even more difficult, Google is going to change the algorithm anytime there's some sort of a weakness in the signals or a loophole that people can exploit, because Google has a very vested interest in making sure that all of the results that are displayed actually deserve to be there. So what it comes down to, you've got to have somebody on staff who truly understands local SEO if you want to show up better in searches, or you need to work with an agency that truly understands local SEO. If you go look at your Google Analytics for pretty much any business out there that's not spending big bucks on paid search, organic search users from Google tends to be the biggest source of traffic and also the biggest source of leads for your business. So SEO is going to help you get more and nurture that source and get you more sales. So think of it like an investment in your future. Now, most businesses want to show up in that map pack because it's prominent. It's right at the top of search results. It has the map and those 3 results. So let's look at the factors that matter for that. The second most important factor is that you have a physical address in the city that's being searched. So if you're outside of a metro area and you're trying to show up in the main city in the metro, it's going to be difficult to show up in that map pack because your address is not in that main city. And then the most important factor is proximity. It's how far away the search results are from the person that's doing the search. But you can't really influence those factors. So for the rest of the presentation, we're going to talk about the factors that you can influence. So I always suggest that people pay attention to the local search ranking factor study that's conducted by Whitespark. They take the top 35 to 40 experts in local search all across the world, and they send a survey out. And it's a pretty in-depth survey about positive factors, negative factors, competitive factors. And then they aggregate all of the results so that you get a pretty good handle on what's going to help get better visibility in search results. And you get 2 pie charts. You get a pie chart for the local pack or the map pack and for Google Maps. And these are the signals that will help you show up better, the signals that influence visibility in those locations. And then you get another pie chart for the factors that influence how you show up in the quote unquote regular organic area of Google. So let's talk about these signals. And we're going to start by talking about the on-site signals or your website content. When it comes to your content, Google doesn't really care how much you have. So don't fall into the trap that a lot of business owners and agencies fall into of equating releasing a lot of content with doing SEO. What you actually need is quality content. You need to be the best answer to the question that the searcher is asking, not have 15 answers to that question. And if we boil it down to a simple concept, if you want to show up as a search result when somebody types in a particular keyword phrase, then you need a page of content on your site that's about that concept. And that page needs to be the best answer to the question that that searcher is asking. And it's not just about answering that one question, it's about answering all the subsequent questions that they'll have once that question is answered. So when you look at the content on your site, you want to make sure that the content is actually unique and about your business, because most people are going to shop around a little bit. They're not going to go and buy from the first business that they find on Google. So they're going to see your competitors. And if you have the same generic BS content that your competitors have, you don't stand out. And if you're not going to stand out to humans, you're not going to stand out to Google. So make sure the content's actually about your business and actually about the local area. And the easy way to test that is take your homepage content or one of your primary product or service pages. And if you were to change the city that you're located in and the name of your business, could you take that content and put it on a similar business's website in a different city? If the content would still work, then that means it's not really about you or the local area. And another pro tip to test your content, Google wants to see conversational content. So if you read your content out loud, now I'm not talking about just reading through it and thinking it in your head, but actually take another person and have them sit there and read it out loud to them. And if it doesn't sound conversational, then you need to do a little bit of work on it. And if it sounds really weird and awkward, it's probably because a lot of keywords have been stuffed in for quote unquote SEO. So once you've written your awesome content, you've got to optimize it so Google really understands what that content is about. So because we're doing local SEO, we want to do what's called Geo Optimization. It helps you better optimize for the local area. And the really cool thing about Geo Optimization is you can test it for yourself. For some verticals, like for attorneys have been really aggressive on SEO. And so they're pretty good with Geo Optimization, and it probably won't matter much. But a lot of other verticals or a lot of areas of the country, or even outside of the US, if you happen to be watching this video outside of the US, Geo Optimization absolutely slays and makes a massive difference. So test it for yourself on a few pages and see if you see some positive movement there. And if so, then go roll it out to the rest of the site. So the elements that you need to optimize on each page, make sure you've got the same keyword phrase between all of these elements, first of all. And then we want to look at the title tag first because it's the most weighted element on the page. You want to have your keyword phrase and your city and state in that title tag. Don't ever put your business name first because you're always going to rank well for that because you're the only business name that. So concentrate on your keywords that you're trying to show it for. The second most important thing to look at is the H1 heading, the big thick headline above your text. You want that same keyword phrase and your city and state. Now, obviously, we already talked about your content needs to be about you and what you do and your local area. So you probably won't have to do anything here because you'll already have that. Most website platforms allow you to set a custom URL for your pages. So make sure your URL also includes the city and state and important keyword phrase that you're targeting. It looks better to Google and it looks better to humans. Make sure you include the keyword phrase and your location phrase in your alt text on your images. Years ago, Google couldn't tell what was in an image, but now machine learning allows it to pretty accurately tell you what's there. But alt text is a descriptor that's in the image embed code, and it's still part of the algorithm. And it's a great way to outpace your competitors because most businesses and most marketers don't do anything with alt text. And then finally, the meta description. The meta description is behind the scenes code, but it populates those couple of gray sentences when you show up as a search result in Google. So it's important to think of it like an advertisement. You want to write something compelling. So you want to make sure you've got your location information and your important keyword phrase. It's also important that you have a blog. It's not a luxury. It's actually a necessity for doing quality SEO in today's world. And you need to post on a regular basis. The reason it's important is because there's a difference between the kind of content that goes in the main section of your website and the kind of content that goes on your blog. Your blog tends to be more informationally focused and your website needs to be more sales focused, trying to push business there. And what's really helpful is to make your blog a local destination, because if you're only posting anything on the blog or anything on your site about what you sell or what you do, then that's a pretty narrow focus on the local area because you're only going to show as a search result when somebody's looking for the solution that you offer. So if you make your blog a local destination and talk about the local area and share helpful and useful information about the local area, you'll get surfaced in search results to people that aren't looking to buy from you. And that may not seem like a smart thing to do, but it's similar to putting a billboard up on the freeway where someone's going to drive by and they'll see your brand and what you do, even though they don't need to buy from you. But hey, a couple months from now, when they do need to buy from you, you're going to be top of mind because they see you every day. So it's the same sort of concept. You want to get more brand awareness. You want to get exposed to more people in the local area before they're looking to buy what you sell. So you're more likely to capture those customers. So really think of it like that billboard. Think of it as a way to expose your business to more people before they're looking to buy and before they're going to start checking out your competitors. In fact, for the clients that we work with, half of the content that we post on the blog is about the business. The other half is just purely informational, helpful information about the local area. And if you need ideas for how to do this, because for a lot of people, this is a new concept. If you need ideas, you can check out this video here. You may have seen it in the past if you're already watching this video series. And it talks about 10 awesome ideas for local blog posts that you can use as a springboard to create your own awesome localized content. So now let's talk about inbound links. Links that point to your site from other websites are really heavily weighted in Google's algorithm. The problem is doing link building is tough. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. So most businesses and actually a lot of SEO agencies, they just don't do link building. But it's really important. And because we're talking about the local algorithm, you want to make sure you're getting localized links because they really help boost local relevancy. The easiest way to get local links is to get involved in the local community. And I'm going to share a couple of ideas of things that you can do here. First of all, local sponsorships are great. Google doesn't want you to buy links, but it's totally okay to buy a sponsorship that results in a link. Little League teams, Pee Wee hockey teams, 5Ks, golf tournaments, all of these are great ways to get localized links. Local meetups are great too. Go to meetup.com and look for local groups that have regular meetings in your area and look for groups that are looking for meeting sponsors. You can throw in 50 or 60 bucks a month to buy their pizza and their soft drinks and get a couple of awesome links out of it. Find any way you can to get local bloggers to write about you and talk to your staff about what they're passionate about and what they do in their free time. Because if someone is a member of a local club or organization and they're pretty involved, chances are it's going to be pretty easy to get a link there. So if somebody's, a president of a local car club, or somebody's got a kid that's on a club soccer team, or somebody's really involved in their church, those are all opportunities to get your business mentioned because they work there. Neighborhood watch sites are great too. A lot of neighborhood watch groups will have WordPress sites. And so if you can give them something worth putting on their site, some special for the neighborhood, you get a great link out of it. And it's hyper local down to a neighborhood level. So think about special neighborhood specific discounts. You can also use Google and come up with your own list of keywords for the clients that you work with, or if you're in-house for the business that you're working with, and just throw your city name in there. And pay attention to those two blue ones at the top where I have in URL : that's what's called a search operator. It's like a filter for Google search results. So if we were to do this and say Dallas in URL sponsorships, it would show Dallas-based websites that in the URL for a page on the site, it has the word sponsorship. So it helps you filter in on specific things you're looking for. We also have an onboarding questionnaire that we share with all new clients and have them fill out. I'm sharing that with you today. So you can take that and use that yourself. And you can download it at the URL right there. And if you'd like to dig in more on links, I did a presentation at SMS in Sydney, Australia a few years ago that's really in depth about link building. So you could go check that out there for more specific tactics that are a little bit more in depth. But I want to move on and talk a little bit about customer reviews. They're obviously important for humans, but they're also pretty weighted in Google's algorithm. So you want to make sure that you've got a proactive process in place. You need to make it easy for people to leave reviews, and you need to make sure that you're asking every customer. So we like to set up a page on the site. We typically will put it at domain.com/reviews. And that page is going to have a simple thank you message that says something like, thanks for doing business with us today. Let us know how we did. Leave a review on one of the following sites. And then you link to your various sites because you don't want someone to have to figure out how to go leave a review on Google or Yelp or wherever it is you want them to go. You want to make sure that you're spreading your reviews out among multiple review sites. It's not all about Google, because Google's going to consider other review sites as well. So you want to make sure you're on Google, but that you're also on the review sites that are important for your particular vertical, like Angie's List or DealerRater if you're a car dealer. And you also want to make sure that you're on Yelp. Now, in the past, people were more concerned with getting reviews on Facebook, but since Facebook has switched to a binary, yes, I recommend, or no, I don't recommend, it's not really a great spot for reviews anymore. But a lot of people hate Yelp, and unfortunately, you can't ignore it, because Yelp powers the stars that show when someone does a search on Apple Maps. So you don't want a situation like this where somebody has a bunch of reviews and a pretty good score on Google, but then a customer goes to look up how to drive to that place of business, and they've got a very low score on Yelp, so they have a low score on Apple Maps. Another thing that's important to understand is if a customer leaves a review and it includes important keywords that you're trying to rank for, you're actually going to rank better when people search for those keywords. But unfortunately, you can't tell people what to write because it's against Google's rules. But this video here shares a Jedi mind trick that you can use, where on that reviews page where you thank people and provide links to your review sites, if you ask a few questions and say something like, hey, if you're not sure what to write, provide details and specific tips. Here's a couple of questions that might help you. And you ask questions that will Jedi mind trick them into using the keywords you want them to use. You want to make sure you respond to every single review. It's really important to respond to everything, both positive and negative. And there's a video there that goes into a lot more detail on that. So if you're answering your own reviews and not using an agency or a service, make sure you watch this videos. And remember, when you respond to those negative reviews, that response that you're posting isn't for the person that left the review. It's for every potential customer in the future that's going to read that review and wants to see how you responded. So you have to be very strategic there. A lot of businesses will freak out if they don't have a perfect score, but you shouldn't worry, because a lot of research has been done that shows that the ideal score is somewhere in the range of 4.3 to 4.7, because everyone knows that people have a bad day and some people are grumpy and they're going to just troll and leave bad reviews, and everybody knows nobody's perfect. Sometimes you drop the ball. So a couple of bad reviews here and there that drop you off that perfect score actually make you look more legitimate. So let's finish up and talk about Google My Business. Your Google My Business listing is the panel that shows up to the side when you show up as a search result when someone searches your name, or it's what allows you to show up in the Map Packer in Google Maps. And it's actually your new home page, because it's the first impression that you make with potential customers. It's what allows you to show in the map pack. So it's important that you claim it and that you optimize it so that you can show up in that map pack that's such a highly coveted spot. You want to make sure you use your exact business name. You don't want to add additional keywords, because that can get you suspended. You want to make sure you choose the right categories. In fact, the categories that you select have massive impact on which searches you're going to show up in. And there's an interactive list from a tool or a company called Plepper that's there, that you can enter a category and it will show similar categories that will help you choose better categories for your listing. It's really cool. And then if you want to check out the categories your competitors have selected, there's a really neat plugin for Chrome called Gmb Spy. So you can download that. And then when you do a Google Maps search for a competitor, it will show you all of the categories that they have selected. It's important to be strategic with categories as well, because the category you select first, your primary category, it carries more ranking weight. So you want to be more strategic. You want to watch the video here, because it talks about how if you're in a really crowded market, you might choose one category, but if you're in a more rural market and there's not much competition, you may want to choose a different category based on the types of searches you'd want to show up for. You want to make sure you're uploading a lot of high quality photos. You want to make sure you've got a local phone number listed. This is a big signal to Google's algorithm. And it's okay to use a tracking number. In fact, it's best practice to use a tracking number, but you want to put your tracking number as the primary number and your local number as an alternate number, so the algorithm still sees that local number. And realistically, you should probably get a tracking number with a local area code as well. You want to make sure that you add what's called UTM Tracking to your website link, because attribution is broken in Google Analytics on mobile searches. A lot of the referral traffic is not passed in to Google Analytics correctly. So even though it came from an organic search on Google, it's going to get classified as direct traffic in Google Analytics. So if you use UTM Tracking, you can force it to be attributed a certain way. So if you add this code to the end of your URL, it will now still keep it under the organic bucket, but it will list it separately from Google. So you'll have Google traffic and you'll have Gmb listing traffic. Now, very quickly, you can see who has clicked on your listing or who has clicked on you as a standard Google search result. You want to make sure you're using Google Posts as well. They're basically free ads. They look like this, where it's a small thumbnail image and a little bit of text. And then when you click, you see the full image and the full text. And like I said, they're basically free ads. And I did a video for Moz, which is an SEO tool company, if you haven't heard of it. They have a really cool video series called Whiteboard Friday. And I did a Whiteboard Friday video earlier this year. It's about 15 minutes, all about Google Posts. So definitely check that out if you're curious and you're not using them. And you want to pay the most attention to what shows up in that post thumbnail, because nobody will see the content of the full post if the thumbnail isn't compelling enough to click on. The problem is image cropping is really wonky and it's inconsistent and it's not perfectly centered. So a lot of times you cut out half of your image and that doesn't make the thumbnail very appealing. So I've created a Photoshop guide that you can download and use, and it's going to give you better control over what's going to show up in that thumbnail. You can download the Photoshop document at the link right there. And it looks like this. Anything that's in that white grid is going to show in the thumbnail. And then the full image will be displayed once that thumbnail has been clicked and they see the full version of the post. You also want to pay attention to the Gmb Questions and Answers section. It's displayed in your profile, but it's actually an element of Google Maps, so it doesn't show up in your Gmb dashboard. So you need to pay attention. The scary thing about it is anybody can ask you a question and any random person can answer that question for you. And a really big problem with it is that customers think it's a chat function or an instant message function where someone's on the other end waiting to answer their question, but it's really community discussion. So you need to be careful and make sure you're paying attention so you don't miss out on any potential business. But most business owners and even a lot of marketers and marketing agencies don't even know that it exists or that it's there. And questions can receive multiple answers. You can get more than one answer to a question, but Google will display the primary answer based on which answer has the most thumbs up. So whichever one has the most upvotes. And a really cool thing about questions and answers is you can use it as a guide for what sort of content you need to put on your site. Because if people are asking the questions in the Q&A section, either that content doesn't exist on your site or it's difficult for them to find. So use that to kind of inform the direction that you go with the content that you put on your site. And then you can go really kind of advanced mode and check out the questions that people are asking your competitors, because then if you've got that content on your site, you'll perform even better than your competitors. And the really awesome thing about it is you can ask your own questions of yourself. So load in your own questions and then answer your own questions and set up a pre-site FAQ page, because if a potential customer's questions are all answered before they even get to your site, you're a heck of a lot more likely to capture that customer. And then get, again, advanced mode. Go look at the questions that people are asking your competitors and ask yourself those same questions and answer them, because then again, you'll stand out. And I always like to finish with something fun. So we'll look at a couple of fun examples of Q&A. This one's always fun. And we see this all the time on a lot of different businesses, that even though the phone number is right there on the screen by the button that you click to ask a question, people will say, hey, what's your phone number? Because remember, they think it's chat. So they're going to ask what your phone number is. And notice here, this was for a car dealership and they had an overheating engine, and that would have been a whole lot of money to fix that overheating engine, but the dealership's not paying attention and they didn't answer. Or this was a fun one. Hey, your website sucks. It's not even a question, but then, hey, somebody answered it and said, yeah, I'm not a fan of it either. So they probably need a little bit of help with their website. And this was for an event that I did in Austin, Texas, and I looked up localized results to try to make it a little bit more personalized. And for this one, it was, does this dealership have a body shop? And the primary answer said, don't go here, look at the reviews. I had a horrible experience. They lie to you and everybody else. But there's 6 more answers. And if you notice, whenever the business answers, it always says owner. And this is a much better answer to the question, but this had no thumbs up. The answer that displayed was the one that had thumbs up. So luckily that guy happened to be in the room and he asked what he could do about it. And we just grabbed 3 people, had 3 people log into Google on their phone and click thumbs up on this answer. And immediately this answer became the primary answer. And this was for a hotel that I did a conference in Boston a few years ago, and it was really confusing how the floors were laid out and how the numbers were. So they asked the question, how are the room numbers ordered? And this guy sarcastically said alphabetically. And we laugh at that. It's a funny example, but that's not helpful for potential customers that stay at that hotel. And this is my all-time favorite. It's for the London Eye, the giant Ferris wheel on the Thames River in London. And it's since been changed because the guy thinks he's a comedian, I guess. But the original question and answer was, do you have to wear a helmet? And the answer was, you don't have to, but you can if you wish. I believe Viking helmets are a popular choice. And now the guys changed the answer to, yeah, you should. I almost fell out a couple of times, which actually is impossible because they're completely enclosed little cars that go around. Still funny, but not as funny as the Viking helmets. But what you want to do is load in all your own questions and answer all your own questions and keep your answers upvoted so that it's a great pre-site FAQ experience like this. Now, I know I went through a lot really quickly. Hopefully that wasn't too painful. And now when you're looking at local search results, you'll understand how things work and you won't just stare and drool. And in fact, you might be really excited about doing SEO on your website. Peace out. That's the end. This was Ricky Bobby's Guide to Showing Up in Local Searches. There's my email address. If you have any questions, you can always email me. I'm happy to help anyone out there. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, I'd be happy to give them to you. Or you can just screen capture this because I share a list of all of the movies at the end. So you have a really cool list of movies to watch. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking around to watch the whole presentation. That's definitely all the time we've got for this week. So you know what that means. Put your hand on the screen right here. We totally just high-fived because you learned something awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Local Search Tuesdays.